Before the Chicago Bears can start signing outside free agents, Ryan Poles first has to decide what he's going to do with his own expiring contracts and who, if anybody, he really wants to bring back.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, I want to go through the Bears' own free agents with expiring contracts this offseason, and got to go through who should the Bears bring back, who should they let walk, who kind of lands somewhere in the middle where it's like, okay, yeah, I guess, if they bring them back, fine. If they don't, we'll be fine too. The big decisions here, the headliners, Keenan Allen, which is going to be very price tag dependent and tricky negotiations for an aging wide receiver. Also tricky negotiations, Teven Jenkins, a quality offensive lineman who can't stay healthy. How much do you pay for that? And what is the market going to decide for Teven Jenkins? And then we'll go through some of the other names here and kind of categorize them between like, yes, guys you want to bring back, or no, let them walk, or kind of somewhere indifferent in between in the middle. But I think I'm most interested to see what happens with Keenan Allen this offseason, because he's still a very good football player, and he's going to get paid some significant amount of money from someone, whether it's the Bears or elsewhere, and it becomes a value proposition for Chicago of how much you're willing to pay for that, and how much you look back at his 2024 season and blame him versus blaming the offense around him. Because yes, it was most certainly a down year for Keenan Allen. He had been coming off of the 1,200-yard season with the Chargers when Ryan Poles traded a fourth-round pick for him last offseason. And we knew he was on the last year of that contract, and we were going to see how that year played out and then kind of decide from there what the long-term future was going to look like for Keenan Allen and the Chicago Bears. We get through a season where he still has 70 catches for just under 750 yards, 7 touchdowns. It wasn't like he was completely washed and just some useless wide receiver out there. He still averaged over 10 yards per reception this season. And it's easy to look at how the Bears' offensive coaching played out and how the offensive line limited the passing game and feel like, man, this probably wasn't as good as Keenan Allen could have been this season, based on the situation he was in and the surroundings of what was going on in Chicago. So that in theory, the Keenan Allen that plays in 2025 could maybe still give you more than what the Bears got from him this season. Maybe not 1,000 yards, maybe not a number one wide receiver anymore, but still a quality player who's got some gas left in the tank. So then as a free agent, like, how much is that worth? And then secondarily to that, is that amount of money worth it to the Bears, right? There's two stories here. There's what will the market determine Keenan Allen's price tag is, and then what that number is that worth it to the Chicago Bears to bring him back and add him to a group with DJ Moore and Roman Dunze? So if you look at some of the other most expensive, some of the other older wide receivers in football, I should say, Keenan Allen is turning 33 years old in April. So he'll play this upcoming season at 33 years of age. There's a number of other receivers that are older than him that are the same age, all in the same general age area here, and there's quite a variety of price tags on them, depending on their durability and their level of production and all that stuff. So like, Cooper Kupp with the Rams, who's apparently on the trade block, he's making $26.5 million a year right now. That's a heck of a lot of money. Keenan Allen's current contract, I should say, the expiring Keenan Allen contract is $20.5 million, $20.5 million per year. I don't expect that Keenan Allen is going to get that same number again in terms of salary on his next contract. His contract is likely going to go down. He had signed his current deal a couple of years ago when he was still more in his prime with the Los Angeles Chargers. After having a down year and getting older, that number is going to come down. I don't think it's going to drop drastically. I don't know if it's going to cut in half, but it is going to come down a little bit. So then how far down. I think there's like 2 wide receivers I look at that are in a similar boat, and their price tags, I think, help set the market for Keenan Allen. I look at Tyler Lockett from the Seattle Seahawks, who is also going to be 33 this season, and DeAndre Hopkins, currently of the Kansas City Chiefs, who's also going to be 33 this season, all the same age. Keenan Allen, Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins. Tyler Lockett's contract pays him $15 million a year. DeAndre Hopkins is at $13 million a year. Again, Keenan Allen is coming off of 20 and a half, so I don't know that he's going to want to jump all the way down to 13, but, could you get him at $15 million? It's a $5 million pay cut on a per year basis, but he's also an older player, and I think the market is going to bear that out. I mean, or is it, is the number 16? Does he need to be higher than where somebody like Tyler Lockett is at this stage of their careers? Because, Lockett only had 600 yards this past season, but it was a down year in Seattle. He had 900 the year before that, 1,000 the year before that. So, it feels to me like these players are in relatively similar positions. DeAndre Hopkins is a little bit of a harder one-to-one comparison because he's had some significant injuries in there and bouncing around a few different teams that have made things tricky for him. But if Lockett's at just under $15 million, that feels like the negotiation point then for Keenan Allen. So let's say you get Keenan Allen to 15 exactly. Still be above Tyler Lockett, but let's hypothetically say Keenan Allen can get $15 million a year on his next contract. 1 or 2 years, $15 or $30 million, whatever that ends up looking like. Is Keenan Allen worth $15 million to the Chicago Bears when you have DJ Moore and Rome Odunze to be your number 1 and number 2 wide receivers? Presumably at age 33, Keenan Allen is now moving into that number 3 receiver role in this Bears offense because you want Odunze to grow into that number 2 receiver role. Do you want to pay $15 million to your number 3 wide receiver in your offense? It's worth noting that $15 million a year would make him the Bears' 5th highest paid player to be your number 3 receiver. It's confusing because Rome Odunze is on a rookie contract. So, that's where the things get still weird, but still, it doesn't feel to me like the Bears are going to be able to get $15 million of production out of a number 3 wide receiver, especially when you consider that Ben Johnson hasn't really had elite number 3 wide receivers in his Detroit Lions offenses. Right? Early on, it was Amon-Ra St. Brown and a bunch of other guys. The other receivers were Josh Reynolds and Quintez Cephas and DJ Chark, average starting caliber NFL wide receivers. They go out and draft Jameson Williams in the first round, and now they have 2 really good receivers in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. But even this season, Tim Patrick's your number 3 wide receiver. He's fine, but he's not a $15 million a year wide receiver. At least I don't think of him as in that category. Now, he's a free agent this offseason, and perhaps the Bears could be interested in his services and reuniting him with Ben Johnson and Antoine Randall L. But, Tim Patrick this past season was playing on a rookie contract, on a 1-year veteran minimum contract. His previous contract with the Broncos was 3 years, $30 million, but he's not jumping up to a $15 million a year guy. And so I just don't know that the Bears can get $15 million worth out of Keenan Allen if that's the number that he even comes down to. If it's higher than that, it becomes an even harder argument. I guess if it's lower than that, you've got Adam Thielen, now of the Carolina Panthers, is 35, and he's making $8.3 million. I don't think you're going to get Keenan Allen down that low. I think he's still a better, more productive player than that. So, I think you're a minimum of 13 and probably more like 15 or 16. And for Chicago, when you've got DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift, all in the passing game there, it just doesn't feel like it's worth that much money to pay for that type of a role in this offense when your OC hasn't necessarily even needed one. I'd much rather take that Keenan Allen money, get a cheaper number 3 wide receiver, and then invest the rest in the offensive line. So how about Teven Jenkins then? Upcoming free agent, young player who has played very well when he's on the field. He's another really tricky player to figure out the valuation here, and it's probably going to be lower than we might think. So does that make it more likely he could still return? It's a tricky situation we'll talk through the details on next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. When the game tips off, The NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better way to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Just because the football season is over doesn't mean you can't stay in the fun with FanDuel, where you can place live bets throughout the game. So you can, even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay, whether it's the NBA or hockey season, soccer, tennis, boxing, and certainly baseball isn't too far around the corner. All of your sports betting needs can make the games that much more fun with FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Keenan Allen's age and price tag make it a little bit easier to walk away from his contract. The Bears' depth that exists, or the Bears' talent, I should say, that exists at wide receiver, makes it easier to say it was fun while it lasted. It was a fourth-round pick that was worth a shot, but time to go in a different direction at wide receiver. Offensive line is more wide open, right? The Bears desperately need to get better offensive line play next season, and you've got Teven Jenkins entering free agency, Coleman Shelton, the center, entering free agency. They already cut right guard Nate Davis, but his replacement, Matt Pryor, is also entering free agency. Backup guard Jake Curhan is entering free agency. The entire of your interior offensive line, besides Ryan Bates, is entering free agency this season. And so if you're not spending the money on Keenan Allen, could there be more money there to pay Teven Jenkins and to go out and get other new starters to bolster that offensive line? Well, we all know the big caveat, asterisk, red flag that comes with Tevin Jenkins. It's the durability. How much is Tevin Jenkins going to be able to play for you each season? Because he has not played a full season in any of his 4 years. He has dealt with injuries at different points of his 4 seasons in the NFL, and we've never really seen him stay consistently healthy for a full football season. Now, I think we can all understand that it's hard for any player to not have some kind of small injuries in any given season. Most players don't play every snap of every season, but Jenkins' injuries have been a little bit more disruptive than that in a way that makes it difficult to invest a significant long-term guaranteed contract in him if his availability isn't necessarily reliable. If you look over the course of Teven Jenkins' career, obviously he's never played a full 17-game season, but even more important than that is the amount of snaps he's on the field for. Yes, like games played, like he might start a game, play 5 snaps, and then leave with an injury. Or, he might miss 3/4 of a game with an injury or whatever it might be, right? That it still counts as a game being played. He's played in, 75% of the Bears' games over his careers, or whatever the number is there. But in terms of the actual number of snaps he's on the field, Teven Jenkins has never played in more than 65% of the Bears' offensive snaps in any of his 4 seasons. This year, 2024, was the first year he hit 65%. This year was the highest percentage of snaps he had played in a Bears season, at 65 exactly. The year before, 2023, he was just under 65% at 64.7%. Those two are a step forward from where he started his career, but he's still every season missing at least a full third of the team's offensive snaps. It's hard to then trust that if you re-sign Teven Jenkins to a long-term contract, are you going to get more than 65% of the snaps from him? Because he just hasn't done it. His rookie season, he didn't play much at all, so I'm not holding that one against him. But then he goes 55, 64, and 65% of the snaps is not a consistently available, durable, reliable player. I don't think you'll find anyone questioning how talented Teven Jenkins is when he plays. And if you had some way to perfectly guarantee that Teven Jenkins would be fully healthy for the next 3 seasons, he would be well worth a significant pay raise and a decent contract. Like he's never been a Pro Bowl guard, but he's an above average starting guard in football and has gotten better over the course of his career. There's a lot to like about Teven Jenkins as a player. But if you can't count on him being available, you can't afford to be paying him a big contract and letting him sit on the bench with injuries. That's what happened to Nate Davis in a very different way, right? But like, the part of the problem is, you got $13 million tied up in Nate Davis or whatever it was, and half the season that's wasting away on your bench, and that money could be used to like get better players that are able to help your football team. And that's the fear with Teven Jenkins. The problem though is that this injury history makes it really difficult to like put a number value then on like, well, what does a Teven Jenkins contract look like? And because you try and look at similar players or whatever, okay, other young guards that enter free agency that are about his level of play, well, they don't usually have these same sort of durability questions. It's hard to find players that are the same level of talent as Teven Jenkins and also the same durability issues. Like, there are worse players who have durability issues, and there are maybe even better players that have maybe not quite the same amount of durability issues, but he kind of lands in this unique sweet spot in between a couple of different tiers of players. Like, if you go to the salary cap websites out there, they'll project, somewhere around a $10 million average annual salary for Teven Jenkins. For me, that feels a little bit high based on where he's been from a health standpoint. But the bigger issue with durability is more guaranteed money than total average salary here. But there's two players I look at in particular then. If we want to make comparisons for Teven Jenkins, okay, can you find other guards who are pretty talented but have some injury questions and it's limited how much they get paid here? I look at not exactly a guard, but Trey Pipkins from the Los Angeles Chargers has mostly played tackle for them. And, early in his career, he was kind of rotating in as a backup, and then he missed some games in there in 2022 and then got a bigger contract heading into 2023. And he got 3 years and just under $22 million a year. So just over $7 million per year average for Trey Pipkins, who played pretty well. I think Teven Jenkins is a slightly better player than Trey Pipkins has been, though, and tackle versus guard changes the valuation. Like, there's not a perfect comparison here. I also look at former first-round pick Will Hernandez, who was initially with the Giants and then jumped with the Cardinals and got a 2-year, $9 million contract. That's only $4.5 million. Like, I think Teven Jenkins is going to get more than those guys. But, like, if we sit at $10 million, like, that's not huge as far as guard contracts go. Say that the projected number is perfectly accurate, which I don't necessarily buy, but even if we just roll with that for a second, like, we've been talking about Chiefs guard Trey Smith might get $20 million a year. So by comparison, if you're paying Teven Jenkins half as much as Trey Smith, like $10 million or even potentially less, if that is that $8 million even, that becomes a more interesting proposition, right? If we were saying, well, Teven Jenkins is going to get top guard money, if Teven Jenkins was going to get $15, $16, $17 million or whatever, that's no way, right? That's a non-starter. We're not re-signing Teven Jenkins for that price, knowing the amount of availability questions we have about Teven Jenkins. But if the availability questions brings the price tag in half and makes it $8, $9, $10 million, would you sign Teven Jenkins to a 1-year, $10 million contract? Prove it. Stay healthy for 1 year. We'll give you $10 million because you've been playing well. 1 year, whatever, the guarantees don't really matter at that point because you're not locked into anything besides that 1 year. That's something I would consider, right? I'm not jumping out of my chair to go sign the deal and rushing up to the contract negotiations and say, get the pen to paper. That's a great steal. But I look at, okay, what are my other guard options? And then there's a reality where a 1 year, $10 million deal for Teven Jenkins might be a decent shot for the Bears to take a shot at it because you're going to need to sign 2 guards and a center. And so are you going to find 2 better guards for better value than that? You might find guards with more durability but aren't as good as Teven Jenkins. And then it sort of becomes a value question of like, okay, would you have Teven Jenkins at 1 year, $10 million, or would you have, an older, lesser guard for 2 years at $6 or $7 million? And it's like, well, the older player, the cheaper player might be more available, but Teven Jenkins might be better when he is healthy. So could you get Jenkins in a decent backup and say that's one spot that's locked down, and then invest bigger in guard and the other guard in the center position? I mean, at this point, like, if I had to bet money, I think Ryan Poles does not re-sign Teven Jenkins. They let Teven Jenkins walk. Notably, Teven Jenkins was a Ryan Pace draft pick, not a Ryan Poles draft pick. And I think, well, that means Ryan Poles doesn't like him. Generally, you think of general managers as more protective of their own draft picks and more willing to move on from guys they didn't actually draft. And so I suspect Teven Jenkins will not be a Chicago Bear in 2025, but we'll see how the market plays out. And maybe, just maybe, if his price tag stays low and the other guard options don't line up for the Bears, could there be a reunion possibility there? Never say never, but let's not necessarily count on it. Those are the big two Bears free agents. But there's some other guys here that aren't necessarily starters. Well, there's actually a couple starters in the conversation, but guys that aren't big-time players, but are important free agent decisions Ryan Poles is going to have to decide on. Some are easy no's, some are easy yeses, and a lot of guys kind of end up somewhere in between. So we'll look at some of the other Bears key free agents next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by PrizePicks. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With PrizePicks, you just pick more or less on at least two players' stat projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. So you could look at Jason Tatum's point totals in the NBA, or Luka Doncic now on the Los Angeles Lakers instead of the Dallas Mavericks, or any of your other favorite sports, hockey and soccer and tennis, and when baseball season comes back around, you can play them all with PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Whether that $5 lineup hits or not, they're going to add $50 into your account instantly when you play $5 and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL with PrizePicks. Run your game. The big money decisions, or the bigger money decisions, are Keenan Allen and Teven Jenkins. There's quite a few other smaller money decisions that, individually, okay, probably doesn't move the needle a ton one way or another. If you spend $2 million here or $3 million there at most for any of these guys, a lot of them are going to be veteran minimum guys. Okay, that doesn't eat much of your salary cap space. But when you've got 12 of those guys, that's $12 million plus dollars that has to go out to those guys. And all of a sudden, okay, that starts to eat into your salary cap space a little bit. And these decisions start to fill out the depth on your roster. And there's a handful of guys that I think are worth checking in on and touching base on, okay, do you want him back or should we just kind of let him go and replace him with someone else from outside the organization? Because worth keeping in mind, brand new coaching staff. Yeah, yes, Ryan Poles has brought a lot of these players in before, but the coaching staff won't have the same connections to some of these guys that the previous coaching staff would have had and maybe would want to bring back because they like them or know them. But new coaches are going to look at it from a pretty neutral perspective. Just look at the tape and say, was this guy any good? Do I want this guy on my team or not? And that could lead to more guys leaving and them going out and getting guys they might be more generally comfortable with. So when you look at the Bears list of free agents, some other names I want to throw into the mix here. Defensive end, Darrell Taylor. Center, Coleman Shelton. Linebacker, Amon Ogbongbemiga. Running back, Travis Homer. Tight end, Mercedes Lewis. Kick returner, DeAndre Carter. And offensive linemen, Matt Pryor and Larry Borum. That's not the full list, by the way. Those are just sort of the most notable names that jump out to me. Everyone else is going to be, veteran minimum contracts. They have a few restricted free agents like Josh Blackwell and Jalen Jones that'll be back, and Doug Kramer and Bill Murray and some other guys. Restricted free agency is barely free agency at all. The Bears get to decide basically whether you just want to bring them back at a guaranteed or at a already preset number or just completely let them go. But there's no real open negotiation there. The rest of these guys have the chance to hit the market and see what their value would be worth. Right away, I think Darrell Taylor, the pass rusher they traded for from the Seattle Seahawks, he's a guy I would be very interested in bringing back. Obviously, all of these guys are going to be price dependent, and I'm thinking, cheap, low-level contract for any of them. If anybody can find a bigger deal somewhere else, then go for it. Because Darrell Taylor is number 3, number 4 type pass rusher in your defense, right? Not a starter. Guy on the bench who rotates in. He had 3 sacks after being traded to the Bears this season. That was actually a career low. But I thought he flashed as a pass rusher, made some nice plays in the running game, and he's got the kind of length and size at the defensive end position that I think Dennis Allen tends to like. And so I could see the Bears saying, yeah, we traded a draft pick for this guy, a late draft pick for this guy, so we might as well keep him around it because we do actually see something in him and liked enough what we saw, and Dennis Allen might be able to fit him in the scheme. He's still going to be rotating behind Montez Sweat, behind Austin, or with Austin Booker, maybe behind DeMarcus Walker if you keep him around. But to me, there's still some value there. He's 28 years old this season. He's still entering the prime of his career. I think you can squeeze more out of Darrell Taylor, and the price should be a bit more approachable. On the other side of the spectrum, center Coleman Shelton is entering free agency. He turns 30 this season. I didn't think he played particularly well. I don't think there's any reason the Bears should bring him back. You have Ryan Bates under contract. Maybe if you cut Ryan Bates for the salary cap savings and then you wanted to make Coleman Shelton your backup center, we could have that conversation. But I would rather go get a guy Ben Johnson and Dan Rashar, the offensive line coach, really wants as a backup center rather than just by default bringing back Coleman Shelton, who I think was more of a Shane Waldron type of guy, came from the Sean McVay offense, even though I don't think they may have overlapped for a year or two in Los Angeles. So that was kind of a Waldron thing that I would expect Shelton to not be back. He's kind of one of the big no's for me. And the other guy who I would prefer not to see come back is kick returner DeAndre Carter. I just kind of feel like the upside's not there. And as he continues to age, he turns 32 this season, I just don't feel like the home run threat's necessarily there. The Bears were so desperate at kick returner for a while, like with how much Velus Jones was messing up, which, side note, I ran into Velus Jones down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl last week, had a conversation with him that I'm not ready to share on air, but boy, stories from his time in Chicago. But nonetheless, Velus Jones couldn't catch a punt or a kickoff consistently, and so they needed to just throw DeAndre Carter back there because they knew he would wave fair catch and he would catch it. That was nice, and it was a stabilizing force, but it feels like the Bears should be able to do better than DeAndre Carter as their kick returner. If you could re-sign him on a veteran minimum contract, bring him to training camp, and have a competition for kick returner, I'm okay with that, but I really want to just, can you get somebody who's more of a dynamic athlete back there, like a running back and receiver, a free agent, a draft pick, whoever it is, get somebody who's a little bit more of a home run threat. Josh Blackwell had the Bears' punt return touchdown this season on the fake. Give me somebody who has more of the home run threat than DeAndre Carter. I'd prefer to upgrade there. As far as other guys, I would kind of want to go out of my way to bring back. I think I've mentioned before, Matt Pryor as a backup offensive lineman, I really like. He signed on a 1-year veteran minimum contract last offseason from the San Francisco 49ers. He was not supposed to be a starter this season. He was supposed to be Nate Davis's backup, but they cut Nate Davis. Matt Pryor ends up starting 15 games for them, which was not the plan at all. And he's not, I don't think he's a starting caliber offensive lineman, but he's a darn good backup with some good versatility. He can play either tackle spot and either guard spot. And if you can get him on another cheap contract, he's a guy I think is well worth the versatility where if he has to fill in to start for one game, you're going to be okay. If he has to start 15 games like this year, you're going to be in a bind. But if you have to fill in for one game, you can get by with Matt Pryor as a backup. So why not bring him back and maintain some kind of continuity anywhere on the offensive line as a backup, not as a starter. I'll throw in, both of their long snappers are free agents. They should probably re-sign one of them. But everybody else here, the linebacker, Ogbongbemiga, or Travis Homer as a number 3 running back, or Mercedes Lewis as a number 3 tight end, or even Larry Borum as a swing tackle. To me, those are all guys where it's shrug, okay. I mean, yeah, if they re-sign Travis Homer and Mercedes Lewis, I'm not going to be mad about it. It's not oh, what a terrible signing, but it's also not some game changer signing either. Or if they let them walk, kind of no harm, no foul in either direction here, right? Larry Borum as a backup offensive tackle, he's not great. He's okay. I don't love it, but if they re-sign him, okay, it's fine. Sure, he's all right. You can do worse. He's a backup, so I'm not going to get upset about it, but they let him walk. It's okay, not a big deal. You can replace it. Any of those guys are fairly replaceable for pretty cheap contracts there. I'll again mention Larry Borum, a Ryan Pace draft pick, not a Ryan Poles draft pick. And Larry Borum was almost cut at the end of training camp this season, so I would not expect Larry Borum is going to be back. I think of Travis Homer as somewhat of a Shane Waldron running back, and I'm guessing he also won't be back, but the Bears will still need a number 3 running back after DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson, so that's a position to keep tabs on. And if the Bears cut Gerald Everett as a salary cap casualty, then if you let Mercedes Lewis also walk, then Cole Kmet's your only tight end. So the Bears are going to have to do some work at the tight end position as well. We talked about Gerald Everett as a salary cap casualty last week on the podcast. So if you want to go through some of the other potential salary cap casualty names, then you can kind of get a sense of who else the Bears might lose and how much salary cap space they could free up from some of those moves. So go back and take a listen to that salary cap casualty episode in your podcast feed. And then come on back tomorrow for another episode of Locked on Bears. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today, hopefully every single day. Don't forget, if you're looking for a second listen, to check out any of our other Locked On Podcast Network podcasts for all of your favorite teams in the NBA, NHL, MLB, and across college sports. We've got you covered with your team every day, including Locked On Bears every day. Back again tomorrow to get you ready for everything free agency, NFL draft related, and more. And of course, we'll always make sure we wrap up with another opportunity for you to bear down.